Please, just dance with me. My ex is here, she whispered, her voice trembling as her manicured fingers dug desperately into the sleeve of a stranger's bespoke tuxedo. She didn't look up to see the cold, dangerous eyes of the city's most feared man soften as he pulled her close. The grand ballroom of the Pier Hotel on Fifth Avenue was a symphony of clinking crystal, hushed wealth, and the intoxicating scent of expensive perfumes mixed with Laurent Perrier champagne. It was the annual Manhattan Philanthropy Gala, an event where the city's elite gathered to out-donate and outdress one another. Daisy Collins took a deep, steadying breath, smoothing her hands over the emerald green silk of her gown. It was a custom piece she had painstakingly saved for, tailored perfectly to her size 18 frame. For years, she had hidden behind baggy clothes and oversized coats, conditioned to apologize for the space she occupied. But tonight was supposed to be different. The silk draped beautifully over her wide hips, accentuating her thick thighs and the generous curve of her bust. She looked beautiful. She felt beautiful. At least she did, until the crowd parted near the towering ice sculpture at the center of the room, revealing a face from her nightmares. Trevor Hayes. Her stomach dropped to the marble floor, the sudden wave of nausea so intense she had to grip the edge of a high-top table to steady herself. Trevor was the man who had spent 3 years systematically destroying her self-worth. He was a corporate lawyer with a silver tongue and a heart made of jagged flint. Whenever they fought, he used her weight as his weapon of choice, leaving her sobbing on their bathroom floor, while he casually packed his golf clubs. "I just want you to be healthy, Daisy," he used to say, masking his cruelty as concern. If you just had a little self-discipline, I wouldn't be so embarrassed to take you to firm dinners." He had ultimately left her for Madison, the woman currently clinging to his arm. Madison was a Pilates instructor from Tribeca, a woman so angular and impossibly thin she looked like she might shatter if a strong wind blew through the ballroom. Daisy watched in frozen horror as Trevor's eyes scanned the room and landed directly on her. For a split second she saw a flicker of surprise, perhaps because she wasn't hiding in the shadows, perhaps because the emerald gown demanded attention, but it was immediately replaced by that familiar, condescending smirk. He leaned down, whispered something into Madison's ear, and they both laughed. Then he began walking straight toward her. Panic, sharp and blinding, spiked in Daisy's chest. She couldn't do this. She couldn't face his thinly veiled insults about how she was filling out her dress. She couldn't stand there and let him make her feel small while she was in the largest, most visible body in the room. Desperation took over. She spun around, her eyes darting frantically for an escape route, but she was trapped between the bar and a massive floral arrangement. That was when she saw him. He was standing entirely alone near the velvet-draped columns, an imposing silhouette of a man who commanded the space around him without even trying. He was tall easily, 6'3", broad-shouldered, and dressed in an impeccably tailored midnight blue tuxedo that looked sharper than a knife's edge. He held a glass of amber liquid, his dark, heavy-lidded eyes scanning the crowd with an expression of profound, intimidating boredom. Daisy didn't think. Her survival instinct simply propelled her forward. Before she could talk herself out of the sheer insanity of her actions, she closed the distance between them, stepping directly into his personal space. She grabbed his forearm. The muscle beneath the fine wool of his sleeve was solid as granite. He stiffened instantly, a dangerous electric tension snapping through his massive frame. His dark eyes snapped down to her face, hard and questioning, a storm brewing in their depths. "Please," Daisy whispered, her voice cracking as the scent of Tom Ford tobacco vanille and something dark and purely masculine washed over her. Please just dance with me." "My ex is here." The man stared down at her. For a terrifying second, Daisy thought he was going to shove her away or call for security. His gaze dropped from her pleading, tear-bright eyes down to the soft, plump curve of her jaw, the nervous flush spreading across her chest, and the tight grip her manicured fingers had on his expensive suit. He didn't look at her with pity, nor did he look at her with the familiar, dismissive gaze she was so used to receiving from men of his caliber. He looked at her like she was a sudden, fascinating complication. Out of the corner of her eye, Daisy saw Trevor closing in, barely 10 feet away, his cruel smirk widening. Oh God, it's too late, she thought, closing her eyes in defeat. Open your eyes, a voice rumbled. It was deep, rough, and commanded absolute obedience. Daisy opened her eyes. The stranger set his crystal blast down on a passing waiter's tray without even looking. He shifted his weight, his large, warm hand coming up to wrap around her waist. His fingers splayed wide against the small of her back, burning through the emerald silk. "If we are going to dance, Mia Bella." "Huh," he murmured, his voice a low vibration that sent a shockwave down her spine. "You need to look at me." Not him. Before Daisy could process the Italian endearment or the sudden, overwhelming security of his grip, he swept her seamlessly onto the polished dance floor, right as the orchestra transitioned into a slow, sweeping waltz. The transition was so fluid, so utterly commanding, that Daisy felt as if she had been caught in a velvet undertow. The stranger held her with a terrifying kind of grace. His right hand was firmly planted on her waist, pulling her flush against his solid chest, while his left hand enveloped hers. "Breathe, hey," he ordered softly, his dark eyes locked onto hers. "You are trembling." "I'm sorry," Daisy stammered, acutely aware of how much space she took up in his arms, waiting for the inevitable shift in his posture, the polite but distant spaceman usually kept when dancing with a woman of her size. But he didn't pull away. If anything, he pulled her closer, his thumbs stroking a slow, mesmerizing rhythm against her hip. "Do not apologize," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Who is the man you are hiding from?" "His name is Trevor." Daisy swallowed hard, trying to focus on the stranger's sharp jawline rather than the fact that everyone on the dance floor was suddenly looking at them. We used to date. He's the one by the ice sculpture, with the blonde." The stranger didn't turn his head, but his eyes flicked briefly over Daisy's shoulder, assessing the target with predatory calculation. A cold, dark amusement curled the corner of his mouth. "The lawyer in the cheap Armani?" Asked softly. A startled, genuine laugh bubbled out of Daisy's throat. "I think it's bespoke." "It's off the rack," the stranger corrected smoothly. "And he is staring at us with a very pathetic expression. I assume he is the reason you looked like you were about to walk to the gallows, rather than enjoying the fact that you are the most beautiful woman in this room." Say, Daisy's breath hitched. She looked up at him, searching for the mockery, the punchline. But his expression was entirely serious. His dark eyes traced the curves of her face, the fullness of her lips, with unapologetic appreciation. "You don't have to flatter me," she whispered, looking down at his immaculate bow tie. "I know I don't look like the women you usually dance with." His hand tightened on her waist, forcing her to look back up. The air between them suddenly felt charged, heavy with a dangerous kind of heat. "Do not presume to know my tastes. I prefer a woman I can actually hold, a woman who takes up space in the world." He stepped into the music, turning her masterfully. "What is your name?" "Bass." "Daisy." "Daisy Collins." "Gabriel," he replied simply. He offered no surname, no job title, just Gabriel. For the next 3 minutes, Daisy forgot about Trevor. She forgot about the years of cruel comments, the restrictive diets that always failed, the deep-seated belief that her body was something to be fixed. In Gabriel's arms, she felt weightless. She felt entirely and dangerously safe. But reality has a nasty habit of breaking the spell. As the song ended, Gabriel kept his hand firmly on the small of her back as they stepped off the floor. They were immediately intercepted. Well, Daisy, I didn't expect to see you here." Daisy froze. Trevor stood blocking their path to the bar, a champagne flute dangling from his fingers. Madison was draped over his side, her eyes raking over Daisy's body with thinly veiled disgust. "Trevor," Daisy managed to say, her voice tight. "I see you're still indulging," as Trevor said smoothly, his eyes dropping to her hips. "Emerald is a bold choice, very expansive." The insult landed exactly as intended. Daisy felt the familiar shame flood her cheeks. She instinctively tried to step back, to shrink into herself, but the massive, unyielding hand on her back anchored her in place. Gabriel stepped forward. The movement was slight, but it immediately shifted the atmosphere. The temperature in their small circle seemed to drop 20 degrees. Gabriel looked at Trevor. He didn't glare, he didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at the other man the way one might look at a cockroach on the sole of an expensive shoe. "And you are?" Gabriel's voice was soft, silken, and terrifyingly cold. Trevor puffed out his chest, clearly trying to assert dominance over a man who dwarfed him in every conceivable way. Trevor Hayes, partner at Hayes & Covington. I'm an old friend of Daisy's." He offered a hand. Gabriel looked at the hand. He did not take it. A partner, but Gabriel mused, the silence stretching until Trevor awkwardly lowered his hand, his face flushing. "How quaint. Tell me, Trevor, does Hayes & Covington specialize in corporate restructuring, or simply in employing men who lack the basic refinement to speak to a lady?" Trevor's smug smile vanished. "Excuse me, I was just, you were just leaving," Gabriel interrupted, his voice dropping an octave. The civility was gone, replaced by a raw, quiet menace that made the hair on Daisy's arms stand up. "Because if I hear you speak to my companion in that tone again, you will find that a partnership at a mediocre law firm will not protect you from the consequences." "Do we understand each other?" Trevor swallowed audibly. The liar's bravado completely crumbled under the crushing weight of Gabriel's stare. I was just joking. Come on, Madison." Trevor grabbed his date's arm and practically sprinted toward the other side of the ballroom. Daisy let out a breath she didn't know she was holding, her knees suddenly weak. "Oh my God, thank you. You didn't have to do that." "I do not tolerate disrespect," Gabriel said, his attention returning to her, the ice in his eyes melting back into a warm, heavy heat. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, I need a little air. Merci, come." Gabriel guided her away from the crowd, pushing open a set of heavy French doors that led out onto a secluded stone balcony overlooking Central Park. The cold night air was a welcome relief. Daisy leaned against the stone balustrade, taking in a deep breath. "I really can't thank you enough, Gabriel. You completely terrified him. You play the intimidation card very well well, I don't actually know what you do." Gabriel stepped out onto the balcony, the shadows of the night seeming to cling to him. He pulled a silver cigarette case from his inner jacket pocket. "I'm in logistics, real estate, import and export." "Phew, you must be very successful." She smiled, feeling bold, feeling alive. He lit his cigarette, the flare of the lighter illuminating the sharp, ruthless angles of his face. "I manage." Before Daisy could ask anything else, the heavy French doors creaked open. A man stepped out onto the balcony. He was dressed in a dark suit, but unlike the gala attendees, his jacket bulked unnaturally under his left arm. He looked frantic. "Boss," the man said in a harsh whisper, his heavy Brooklyn accent cutting through the quiet night. He didn't even acknowledge Daisy. "We got a problem." Gabriel's entire demeanor shifted. The attentive, charming man vanished, replaced by something cold and absolute. "Speak, Matteo. I am busy." "It's the shipment down at Red Hook," Matteo stammered, stepping closer. "The Russians. They ambushed the trucks. 4 of our guys are down. They took the cargo, Mr. Rossi." Daisy's heart stopped. "Mr. Rossi." She lived in New York. Everyone who read the Metro section of the Times knew the name Rossi. The Rossi crime family, the most brutal, untouchable syndicate on the eastern seaboard. Gabriel's face turned into a mask of pure, unadulterated violence. The air around him practically cracked with dark energy. "Get the tactical team," Gabriel ordered, his voice devoid of all humanity. "Tell Leo to lock down the ports. No one leaves Brooklyn. If they resist, gut them. Boss." Matteo nodded sharply and disappeared back into the ballroom. Slowly, agonizingly, Gabriel turned his head to look at Daisy. The cigarette burned in his fingers. The silence on the balcony was deafening. Daisy pressed her back against the cold stone of the balustrade, her wide eyes locked on the man who had just saved her from her ex, the man who had held her so tenderly on the dance floor. She hadn't just asked a wealthy businessman to dance. She had just used the head of the New York Mafia as her shield. And by the dark, possessive look in his eyes as he stepped toward her, she realized he had no intention of letting her go. Chaos erupted softly. Before Daisy could fully process the terrifying weight of the name Rossi, Gabriel's large hand was back on her lower spine, gripping the emerald silk with a possessive, territorial firmness that anchored her to the stone floor. The shift in his demeanor was absolute. The charming, attentive stranger who had swept her across the dance floor was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating apex predator. "We are leaving," Gabriel stated. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a gravitational pull. Panic finally shattered Daisy's paralysis. "Wait, what?" "No, Gabriel, I have my coat in the cloakroom. I can just get an Uber to my apartment in Astoria." Turning his head slowly, Gabriel looked at her. The streetlights from Fifth Avenue caught the hard, unforgiving angles of his jaw. "The men who just ambushed my trucks are not petty thieves, Daisy. They are the Volkov Syndicate. Right now, they are looking for leverage. They are looking for weaknesses. You are currently wearing my scent, and you are seen in my arms by half of Manhattan's elite." "But I'm nobody," she pleaded, her voice trembling as she planted her heels into the marble, trying desperately to resist his pull. "I just asked you to dance to avoid my ex-boyfriend. They don't care about me. They care about what is mine," Gabriel growled, his voice a low, terrifying vibration that made her stomach drop. "And tonight you made yourself mine. Move." He didn't wait for her to argue. Guiding her swiftly off the balcony, he bypassed the glittering chaos of the grand ballroom entirely. Instead, Gabriel navigated the labyrinthine back hallways of the Pierre with the familiarity of a man who owned the building. They moved through the bustling stainless steel industrial kitchens, past stunned chefs and busboys who immediately averted their eyes the moment they saw Matteo walking point, his hand resting conspicuously inside his tailored jacket. Bursting out through the loading dock doors into the freezing New York night, the sheer scale of Gabriel's reality hit Daisy like a physical blow. Waiting in the dimly lit alleyway was an idling, armored black Mercedes-Maybach 6680. 4 men in dark suits stood in a defensive perimeter, their eyes scanning the rooftops and street corners. The moment Gabriel emerged, the rear passenger door was thrown open. "Get in," Gabriel ordered, his hand shielding her head as he practically shoved her into the cavernous, leather-scented interior of the Maybach. Scrambling across the plush seats, Daisy pressed herself against the far window, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Gabriel slid in beside her, immediately dominating the enclosed space. The heavy doors slammed shut with a definitive, airtight thud that sounded entirely too much like a vault ceiling. "Drive," Gabriel commanded the driver. "Take the FDR drive. Double back through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. Make sure we are not followed." The massive engine purred, and the Maybach shot out of the alleyway, merging violently into the late-night Manhattan traffic. Up front, Matteo racked the slide of a Glock 19, the metallic clack echoing sickeningly in the quiet cabin. Shivering violently, Daisy wrapped her arms around her generous waist, suddenly acutely aware of how exposed she was in the sleeveless gown. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving behind a cold, biting terror. She was sitting in a bulletproof car with heavily armed men, kidnapped by a mafia boss because she had wanted to make her fat-shaming ex-boyfriend jealous. The absurdity of it would have been funny if she wasn't so utterly terrified. Noticing her violent trembling, Gabriel stripped off his heavy midnight blue tuxedo jacket. Without a word, he draped it over her shoulders. The thick wool retained his body heat, enveloping her in the intoxicating, grounding scent of tobacco, expensive cologne, and dark danger. "Drink this," he murmured, pulling a crystal decanter from a hidden compartment in the center console and pouring a measure of amber liquid into a glass. Daisy took it with shaking hands, the glass clinking against her teeth as she took a desperate swallow. The Macallan 25 burned a fiery, comforting trail down her throat, settling the immediate nausea. "Are you going to kill me?" she whispered, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Gabriel paused, his dark, heavy-lidded eyes fixing on her face. For a fleeting second, the ruthless Mafia boss softened. He reached out, his large, calloused thumb gently wiping away a stray tear that had escaped down her cheek. "I am going to protect you, Maya Bella," he said softly, his touch sending a confusing electric jolt of warmth straight to her core. "You are safer in this car than you have ever been in your life." "Why?" she asked, her voice cracking. "I am overweight, unremarkable, and I live in a fourth-floor walk-up in Queens. I am nothing to you." Gabriel's jaw tightened. He shifted closer, the heat radiating off his massive frame pressing against her side. His gaze dropped to the plush swell of her thighs pressed tightly together on the leather seat, then back up to her wide, frightened eyes. "You have spent years letting a weak man make you feel small, Daisy, because he was terrified of how beautifully large you are," Gabriel stated, his voice thick with raw, unapologetic desire. "You are not unremarkable. You are exactly what I want. And nobody touches what I want." The Maybach did not stop in Queens. Instead, the heavily armored vehicle glided silently into a subterranean private garage beneath a towering, ultra-luxury glass skyscraper in Tribeca. The building, 50 stories of impenetrable security and exorbitant wealth, belonged entirely to the Rossi family. Stepping out of the car, Daisy's legs felt like lead. She kept Gabriel's tuxedo jacket pulled tightly around her shoulders, a desperate armor against the surreal reality unfolding around her. Flanked by Matteo and 2 other silent, imposing guards, Gabriel escorted her into a private, biometric-locked elevator. The ride to the penthouse was silent. Daisy watched the digital numbers climb higher and higher, taking her further away from the ground, further away from the life she knew. When the brass doors finally parted, she stepped into a fortress of modern luxury. The penthouse spanned the entire top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking, panoramic view of the glittering Manhattan skyline, stretching from the Freedom Tower to the glowing spire of the Empire State Building. Dark mahogany, polished marble, and original artwork including a massive, chaotic piece by Jean-Michel Basquiat decorated the expansive space. "Sit," Gabriel instructed, gesturing to a massive, semi-circular velvet sofa that faced the city lights. Daisy sank into the plush velvet, the material swallowing her. She watched anxiously as Gabriel walked over to a marble-wet bar. He poured himself a neat whiskey, his broad back facing her. The silence in the penthouse was heavy, broken only by the distant, muffled wail of a police siren far below on the streets. "I need to call my sister," Daisy finally said, her voice sounding small in the massive room. "If I don't show up for brunch tomorrow, she'll call the police." "Your sister lives in Chicago," Gabriel replied evenly, turning around to face her. "She will receive a text from your phone stating you met someone at the gala and are spending the weekend in the Hamptons. My men are already clearing your apartment in Astoria. Everything you need will be brought here." Daisy jumped up from the sofa, the silk of her emerald gown pooling around her ankles. "Excuse me, you can't just erase my life. I have a job at the gallery. I have a cat. You can't keep me here." Gabriel crossed the room in 3 long strides. He didn't touch her, but his sheer proximity forced her to stop screaming. He towered over her, his dark eyes intense and unyielding. "I am not keeping you here to be cruel, Daisy," he said, his voice deadly serious. "I am keeping you here because you are a dead woman if you walk out those doors. Because I danced with you," she cried, tears of pure frustration welling in her eyes. "Because of some stolen trucks in Red Hook." "Because of Trevor," Gabriel corrected sharply. Daisy froze. "What?" Setting his glass on a side table, Gabriel pulled a heavily encrypted smartphone from his pocket. He tapped the screen a few times and held it out to her. Confused, Daisy looked at the screen. It was a surveillance photograph taken inside the Pierre Hotel earlier that evening. It showed Trevor standing in a quiet alcove, handing a thick manila envelope to a heavily tattooed man in a cheap suit. "Trevor Hayes is not just a corporate lawyer," Gabriel explained, his tone devoid of emotion. "Hayes and Covington is a front. They manage the offshore accounts and shell corporations for the Volkov-Bratva. The Russians." The blood drained from Daisy's face. She swayed on her feet, the room suddenly spinning. Trevor, the man who had meticulously berated her for eating a piece of bread at dinner, the man who cared so much about his pristine public image, was laundering money for the Russian mob. I was at the gala tonight to observe him, Gabriel continued, his voice softening just a fraction as he saw the shock wash over her. We knew the Volkovs were planning a move against my territory. I needed to see who Trevor's handler was, and then you walked up to me. Oh my God, Daisy breathed, covering her mouth with her hands. I ruined your operation. I interrupted you. No, Gabriel stepped closer, his large hands reaching out to gently grip her thick hips, steadying her. You provided the perfect cover. Nobody questions a man distracted by a stunning woman. But the Volkov handler saw you with me. He saw the way I looked at you. Gabriel's thumbs stroked the soft silk covering her hips, his touch branding her. In their world and in mine, leverage is everything. If they find you, they will use you to get to me. They will torture you to force my hand, and then they will kill you. Trevor will not protect you. He will likely be the one to hand you over. A cold, terrifying clarity settled over Daisy. Her old life was gone. The moment she touched Gabriel's arm at the gala, she had stepped onto a battlefield she didn't understand, wearing an emerald gown as armor. So, I am your prisoner, she whispered, looking up into his dark, dangerous eyes. You are my guest, Gabriel corrected smoothly, pulling her flush against his solid chest. The heat of his body seeped into her bones. You will have anything you desire: clothes, food, art. My men will protect your life with their own, and in return, you will stay by my side until the Volkovs are entirely eliminated. And after? She asked, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his chest. When it's safe. Gabriel's lips curved into a slow, devastating smile that promised both ruin and worship. His hand moved up to tangle in the hair at the nape of her neck, tilting her head back. By the time it is safe, Mia Bella, he murmured, right before his lips claimed hers in a bruising, possessive kiss. You will never want to leave. If you loved this story about Daisy finding her worth in the arms of a dangerous man, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more thrilling romance dramas, and share this video with a friend who loves a good plot twist. Drop a comment below. Would you have gotten in the car with Gabriel? See you in the next story.